We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
Who taught you to grieve? If you're extraordinarily lucky, perhaps you know when and how and who you were with and who taught you how to grieve. I lost my mom when I was 31 years old, and that had a profound impact on me. It changed my whole world. And looking back, it's so clear to me that no one I knew at that time could have taught me how to grieve in a healthy way. And I don't think I'm alone. Hey, everybody, it's Boysen. On today's episode, I have the honor of speaking with David Kessler. David is an internationally renowned grief expert, author, and teacher whose life's work is helping us navigate the most human of experiences, loss. You may know David as the co-author of On Grief and Grieving with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, or from his best-selling book, Finding Meaning, The Sixth Stage of Grief. But David's not just an academic. His wisdom is forged through deeply personal losses, including the death of his own son. In our conversation, we explore why our culture is grief illiterate, how unprocessed grief shapes everything from our relationships to our health, and why healing doesn't mean moving on. It means no longer being controlled by our pain. We also talk about the Mankind Project's surprising impact on David's own family and why grief can't be a solitary journey. We need each other to heal. This is a powerful, heartfelt conversation that speaks directly to the soul of what we're doing here, reclaiming our emotional lives as men and as humans. Welcome to the Mankind Podcast. Everybody, welcome back. It's Boysen Hodgson with the Mankind Podcast, the podcast where we set out to prove, and I think we're doing an extraordinary job, that there is more than one way to be a man. Today is an incredibly special treat for me. I get to sit with David Kessler. David, say hello.
I get to sit with you and everyone listening, so it's a special day for me.
Thank you. That's really generous. So David Kessler, if you don't know who David Kessler is, David is one of the world's foremost experts on grief and loss. Literally, grief.com is David Kessler. His experience with thousands of people on the edge of life and death has taught him the secrets to living a happy and fulfilled life, even after life's tragedies. He is the author of 6 books, including his bestseller, Finding Meaning, The Sixth Stage of Grief. He co-authored 2 books with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, including On Grief and Grieving, updated her 5 stages of grief for grief. His first book, The Needs of the Dying, received praise from Saint Mother Teresa. David's volunteer work these days includes being an LAPD specialist reserve for traumatic events, as well as having served on the Red Cross's disaster services team. He worked for over a decade in a 3-hospital system. He was trained for bioterrorist events as well as epidemics and pandemics. He is the founder of www.grief.com, which has over 5 million visits yearly from 167 countries. David has some overlap with the Mankind Project in terms of men that he knows who have been connected, and he has also been extraordinarily generous in inviting some men to do his work, to do his training program on grief. And I have gotten direct feedback from men who have participated in that on the profound impact that it had on them. Thank you, David. I'm glad to have you here.
You're welcome. Thank you for that introduction. You forgot to let everyone know I was president of my ninth grade class 2 years in a row when I repeated the grade. It's
That's
funny. It took my kids a while to get that joke. They were like, "Wait, do you mean you failed a grade?" And I'm like, "Well, we called it being held back."
being held
But
back. That's
anyway,
correct.
so
And
I'm glad to be here with you.
hey, it's so cool. We have something in common. I was also the president of my ninth grade class.
There you go.
So there we go. So I'm I'm gonna start out with something that I think is out there in the culture, and I hear this talked about in Mankind Project circles. This idea that Western culture, that modern culture, is kind of killing itself partly because of our unwillingness to process our grief. How do you feel about that?
I don't know that I would go so far as saying killing ourselves, but
Thank
I
you.
will say there's a real cost to not attending our grief. And I want you to think about the idea of whether someone's exploring the wilderness or on a long hike or just seeing the countryside. What if you decided you're only going to go from peak to peak to peak? You wouldn't appreciate the peaks because you didn't go through the valleys. You wouldn't understand it all because you didn't know the valleys. And I think we live in a society that's all about be the best, be on top, man up to that peak and climb every mountain. And it's like, well, is anyone teaching us how to walk through the valley? Because the valley is part of life. So I think that's part of that um, grief world that we're talking about.
Thank you. And you have, I mean, your interest in this and your expertise and your wisdom about grief comes from a lot of personal experience. Do you want to share some of your story just to kind of put us in the frame?
Sure. Um, I grew up with a mother who was ill and not doing well. And when she was really sick at one point, I was 13 years old. She had to go to a hospital in the big city for a treatment. And we were at the hotel across the street when we could afford it. We would hang out in the lobby when we couldn't. And at one point, um, people in the hotel started yelling fire, and everyone ran out, and there was flames coming out of the 18th floor. We all ran out and evacuated. We're watching it. The fire trucks pulled up, and uh, you know, I had been bored in a hotel lobby and a hospital lobby. So all this fire trucks and firemen and police coming, I'm excited. I think I'm in an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. And all of a sudden, shooting started, and they realized this wasn't just a fire, but this was an active shooter. It went on for hours. It's now considered one of the first mass shootings in the US. So I saw at a young age this tragedy, and I saw police officers, and I saw first responders, and so many people give their life and have their life taken. Um, and then my father desperately trying to get us back to the hospital, and we finally did, only for my mother to die a couple of days later. And there was no one to help me. The
Mm.
only advice I got from anyone, because there wasn't like a lot of social workers and people there in the hospitals the way there are today, is one of the other patient's family members said to me in the hallway, be strong. So I think my interpretation, like a lot of other people, is forget your feelings, man up, and take care of everyone. And I tried to at certain points, talk to my father about my grief and our grief and his grief, and he would always shut it down and couldn't talk about it. And I came away from that. Number one, I lived in a rural, not a rural area, but a small town that I thought I was like the only kid who ever had a mother die. I mean, I thought I was the only one that grief ever affected.
Mm.
And I knew I was screwed up. I dropped out of high school, ninth grade. I dropped out of high school. Um, I ended up just being lost for a few years. And thank goodness I had a neighbor who said to me, you know, you can challenge your high school diploma and go on to community college, which I did. And they told me
Mm.
there was two easy classes when I went to college. You know, that first day in registration, I got the tip. Two easy classes: human sexuality and death and dying. And then I heard human sexuality filled up, no more. So I'm like, there's a death and dying class? I'll take a death and dying class. And all of a sudden I realized there was a language for what I was feeling. There were words. There was this woman, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who did this book, Stages of Dying and on Death and Dying. And I met other people who had loss, and my life changed from there. So that's sort of my origin story. And, you know, I also saw, I like to add this, you know, we think grief, you're going to be sad in a corner crying. But I saw how in my teenage years and my young 20s, I didn't still know how to really attend to my grief and was working on it. You know, horrible relationships, horrible
Yeah.
abandonment. I blew up every relationship I ever had. So, I mean, I think we sort of need to understand that grief isn't just the crying in the corner, grief infiltrates all parts of our lives.
Thank you. I think that's beautifully said. And there is a personal, so that's like the very personal level of the story. My mom passed away in 2002, and that also, yes, how I continued to not be able to process the grief, what it meant in my relationships with my brothers. I have six brothers, and what it meant for all of us as we were trying to process that, all of these different aspects of grief. What does it mean beyond the personal and beyond the interpersonal relationships? How do you think our culture is suffering because of our collective lack of response to grief, collective holding one another?
I think it's getting better.
Oh, that's
I think in
great.
the strangest ways, the pandemic got us talking more about grief. I still think we have a ways to go, but we're a grief illiterate society. And I think it's challenging. We don't know how to witness each other's grief. And I think we live in a current environment that's making it even worse. You know, a lot of times because of either current events or politics, someone is in grief, and instead of them getting the witnessing they need, they end up hearing a political opinion.
Mm.
You know, like someone says, you know, I remember I knew someone who said that, you know, her uh, their mother died of COVID, and someone was like, "Yeah, I don't know if I believe in the mask thing," and it's like, "What? Wait, wait, wait." So I get we've got political opinions, but when someone's loved one dies, it's our job to see their pain. It's different than the discussion about what's going on in the world. And I think it's easy with a lot of events now to hear something bad that's going on and respond with our thoughts on the world and not seeing the person in front of us that's in pain.
Yes. Thank you. And let's go back to what you very first said, which is, I think it's getting better, or you see some things. Where do you see hope? Where do you see things getting better around grief?
Just it becoming a bigger discussion. I mean, listen, when I started out decades ago, I was talking in a vacuum. No one wanted to talk about grief. And now, I'm in a lot of places talking about it, and the conversation's going on and it's shifting. I mean, I'm here with you. I'm in a lot of places I would never have been on before. So I think we're getting more open to it.
Thank you. Let's spend a little time, because we can, talking about the 5 stages and the 6th stage as you
Sure.
define it in your book, to give people an idea. And I know, well, here's evidence that it's gotten better, right? As many of us are familiar with the idea of the 5 stages, and even some additional understanding around, we don't go through them all at once, and we don't go through them in order, and all of those kinds of things. So talk about that.
Well, I was privileged to be a student of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she talked in early on about how the stages pertain to grief, and she also made it clear that the stages aren't linear. There's no one right way to do dying or grief, and uh, we would talk. We had done one book together called Life Lessons. And then when uh, as time went on, I would just tell her, Elizabeth, people are really trying to turn the stages of death and dying into, stages of grief, and they're making them 5 easy steps. And so finally she said to me, all right, let's do another book. And we did one, adapting her stages of dying for stages of grief. And literally, we said on page 1, no right way to do grief, not linear. You don't have to follow any model, all those things. So a lot of times when people, criticize them, I said, well, we agree with you on page 1 if you'll open the book. The stages, for anyone who's not familiar, are denial. And these stages occur, by the way, death, divorce, pet loss, job loss. Denial, I can't believe this is happening. Anger, I'm pissed that this is happening. Bargaining, all the what ifs and if onlys. Um, Depression, which is the sadness, and then acceptance. So, and I would always say, each one of them has their own layers of misunderstanding, and the press sometimes wants to reduce it to 5 quick ways out of grief. But grief is messy. And I think acceptance, we think there's like one day you find acceptance, like, oh, it was in the top drawer. I looked everywhere but the top drawer. No, there's like, a new layer of acceptance every year for us around losses, and a million different acceptances. You have to find a little acceptance when you are planning the funeral, another little acceptance when you go to the funeral, the first year. So it comes up a lot. And so I was honored to work with her. And after she passed, I would still see, the stages getting misinterpreted. And then 8 years ago, out of the blue, my younger son died unexpectedly. So here I was, after all these years of thinking my grief is behind me, thrown back into the epicenter of the pain. And, It's as brutal as anyone could imagine it was.
Yes.
I I I had to take my own medicine. I had to go to a grief counselor. And I used to say to people, go to a grief counselor, go to grief groups like I was handing out candy. I had to go to a grief group and I took out my contacts. I put my glasses on. I had a cap. I sat in a grief group 5 feet from a table with my books. And I couldn't tell anyone that's me. I'm that guy. I'm the grief expert. I had to be the father that buried a child. And in that process, over time, it just, the pain was intense. And as I was walking through that process, I would go, "Yep, I'm in denial. Yep, I'm angry. Yep, I'm this." And I had a lot of trouble when I got to acceptance. I'm like, that's it? I'm just going to accept this someday? Just be done? Accept that's it? And one day I found some papers that I had written about meaning and grief.
Mm.
And it didn't take my pain away, but it gave it a cushion. And it really began to help me. So I started researching that, the idea of meaning. And one of the things that I began to realize is that meaning could be helpful. And eventually I talked to my publisher about it. And they said, this is the 6th stage, meaning. And I'm like, well, we don't want to stop at acceptance. And I was really honored. We asked the Kubler-Ross family and the Kubler-Ross Foundation, and they gave me permission to add a 6th stage to her iconic stages. So I was very grateful to them. And that ended up being the book, Finding Meaning, the 6th Stage of Grief. And there's also a workbook that goes with it too, to sort of walk people through the method. And, that's how the 6th stage came about.
Thank you. I want to continue in the talking about meaning, and the first thing that I want to do is, I think that it's one of the tropes that we hear out there is, everything happens for a reason kind of things, as one of the bypasses to grief. And if you can't see David if you're just listening to the podcast, but I just got a beautiful eye roll. It was just spectacular. Talk about
People
that.
would say to me, like, even I've heard that over all the years. But then
Yes.
when people would say to me after my son died, yeah, everything happens for a reason, I'd be like, what do you got? What do you got? I could use a good reason. What do you got? That didn't comfort me at all.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of platitudes like that just aren't helpful. I mean, everything from everything happens for a reason or God needed another angel. I'm like, who is this God that's got an angel shortage and is just taking people? Or, God takes the good ones. I'm like, well, guess I better be bad. It's like they don't make a lot of sense and they're just platitudes that are kind of out of date and don't really help people in grief. As you mentioned, my site's grief.com, and I can see the statistics and stuff, and
Yeah.
it gets visited at 3 a.m. on the page that's the best and worst things to say to people in grief. We are grief illiterate, and no one has taught us what to say.
And so right there it is. For those of us who don't know what to do, for those of us who do get confronted by this, what are some of those things that people go looking for at 3 a.m.?
Yeah, I think the best thing folks should know is don't start a sentence with at least. At least they died quickly. At least they're not suffering anymore. At least you don't have to deal with their addiction. At least you don't have to deal with their mental health issues. At least you don't have to deal with their cancer. None of those at least. And The best thing is, I think I am a fixer by nature.
Mm,
I mean, give me any problem and I
mm.
promise you I got three solutions. I don't guarantee them, but I got three solutions. Until you come to death and grief, and there is no solution. So we still try to fix people, not realizing they're not broken. So the toxic positivity, the bright siding's not helpful. The best thing to do is just go, hey, I don't even know the right words, but I just want you to know I'm here with you and I'm going to walk with you. I don't know what you're going through, but I'm going to walk alongside you.
Yes. Thank you.
Now, I got to throw in a little personal thing in that
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
As a parent, not only is it devastating to have to say goodbye to a son, but to watch my older son in pain. And do you think my son's going to any grief things I'm doing? Do you think he wants to go to a grief event or go to a seminar or hear me talking? I mean, at one point, I invited him to a talk I was given, and he said, yeah, why would I want to go through that? I lived through it once. Why would I want to go through it again? So I couldn't help my own son. And I suggested so many things to him. This conference, that conference, nothing bit, nothing stuck. You know what finally helped him?
Mm.
The Mankind Project. That's where he worked on his grief. That's what was right for him.
I am very moved. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much for sharing that. Um, yeah. So outside of, and I guess I will say, right? So I have had the distinct honor, privilege of witnessing a lot of men over the years. I've been involved in Mankind for over 20 years. A lot of men do work on their grief in that kind of container. And I think that probably points to something that you speak about in your work, but grief is not something we do alone.
Yeah, one of the things is think of this. What is the cruelest thing we do in the world, like in war? We kill someone. The second cruelest thing is we put them in isolation. Isolation is pretty devastating to us as human beings. And so I think for people in grief, so many people say to me, I got a family member who's in grief, they're isolating. And I'm like, are you sure you're not isolating them? Oh, no, we tell them to get out. We tell them to do things. I'm like, sounds isolating to me if they're not up for it. And we don't know how to meet people where they are. And one of the things that's really interesting about so much information that's coming out about grief and trauma is grief and trauma happen because of outside circumstances that with things that were done to us or happened or people did things. And the healing comes from other people. Often not the people who did it, but we need other people to heal. We heal collectively in a tribe. We need others for our healing. Can't do it alone.
Thank you.
I
That
have
is
26 groups online.
Mm,
And one of the things that amazes people is we find ourselves in each other's stories. Someone else asked the question we didn't know we needed to hear. We also find our healing in each other.
What's up, everyone? Brandon here. And, I grew up thinking hustle was the only way. I had to push through, grind, burn myself out, rinse and repeat. But now I know better. These days, I'm chasing flow, that steady energy, sharp mind, calm focus. That's why I start every morning with Magic Mind. It's not an energy drink, it is a mental performance shot built to keep me level and productive all day. No crash. You can get your hands on Magic Mind when you go to magicmind.com/mankind50 and use code mankind50 for up to 48% off. When you support our sponsors, you support our show, and trust me, you will not regret it when you get your hands on this stuff.
I had a conversation with a woman named Stephanie Harrison who has a book called New Happy. And one of the things that she does that's very interesting in her book is debunks Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the pyramid idea that we've all had. And at the top of the pyramid is self-actualization. And the debunk that she does is very much like what you've done with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work and the 6th stage of grief, which is beyond personal achievement, that kind of enlightenment. There is transcendence, and transcendence can only happen with others. That our service to the world and what we give from all that we've achieved is like the ultimate achievement. And it seems like here we are again with healing doesn't happen alone.
Right.
We need each other to be able to heal.
Absolutely.
Tell me, share if you can, a story about what healing, what being with, as you said, acceptance is something that happens incrementally. We are never healed from the big losses that we have. But what does release look like? What does that opening look like in what you've witnessed working with people?
Well, I think one of the first confusing things is there's a lot of people who somehow think healing means moving on and forgetting.
Yeah.
To me, healing means the event no longer controls me. Now, when we're first in grief and trauma, the event does control us. It's overwhelming, it's everything. But eventually, we want to find our power again. Trauma and grief take away our power. We want to find our power again. So it's that I don't live my life from the losses and the trauma. I don't live my relationships from the loss and trauma. I'm not a abandoned guy looking for the next person to abandon me. I'm not a wounded person looking for the next person to reenact that wound with me. All those things, I finally find control of those things. And it takes time. And, I think ultimately with grief around the death of someone, it's to eventually remember with more love than pain.
Thank you. I've heard a definition of grief as love with nowhere to go.
Hate it.
Hate it. Tell me more.
I'll tell you why. Here's what people love about it, and I do understand. It early on reflects the feeling of, I can't find my loved one. I can't track them. I can't be with them. They're physically gone. It does note the pain.
Mm-hmm.
Where I don't resonate with it is, I love my son every day who died. I keep parenting. Under grief.com, the saying is, love never dies. I don't give death the power to end my relationships or my love. It has the power to take someone away physically, but that's it. So I love my son every day. I love everyone who died. And when people get worried about moving on, I'm like, oh, I bring them with me. I bring them with me. You know, my I go to Yosemite. My son never saw it. I'm like, all right, I'm bringing him with me. I don't leave the dead behind. So I think it's really important to, and I think that blocking of the love, there's nowhere for it to go. It's blocked, gives us an additional pain. So that's why I'm not a fan of it. With all due respect to whoever created it, not a fan of it.
Thank you so much. That's really beautiful. Thank you. And I love that idea of bringing them with us, and what you said, I continue to love my son every day. That this idea that the relationship isn't over, the
Right.
relationship is just different
Correct.
than it was.
And not
Thank
an
you.
easy concept to get early on.
Yeah. Yes. What do you make of the fact, this is slightly different tact, but what do you make of the fact that we are in an incredibly everlasting life, youth obsessed culture?
From my viewpoint, I started my career seeing people die so young. And I've witnessed over the years so many people die young that it's pretty ingrained in me that age is a privilege. So getting old is a privilege. And it's a privilege that I've seen so many people not get to have. So I get looking young and looking good, and that's fine. I wouldn't make it our main obsession. But, look, if it does become someone's main obsession, I mean, I have compassion for them because that's out of their fear. Fear we're not enough. Fear we're not going to be good enough. Fear we're going to be replaced.
Thank you. What are some pieces that you might offer to folks who are, it seems inconceivable to me sitting where I'm at, but folks who are first facing a big loss in their lives?
I often tell them no feeling is final. When you're just in that big grief, it feels like that pain is forever, or that guilt is forever, or that whatever it is forever, and you are going to be stuck with it, and we project it out for the next 40 years. And I tell them no feeling is final. Your feelings are going to change. You're not going to be in that kind of pain forever. It's going to be different. It's going to change. It's going to transform. Just know, not forever.
Thank you. You have been training people for a number of years in how to work with others who are helping folks through grief, who are in touch with death and dying in their worlds. Talk a little bit more about how you train folks for this work.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I know we live in a world that you can become a therapist without one mandatory grief class. Don't have to take one grief class and you can be a therapist. You can become a coach and not be a therapist. You can, most bereavement group leaders are not trained They were just willing to be in that position. Not licensed, just willing to be in that position and help out. A lot of people think grief groups in the world are run by therapists. Most of them are run by everyday people who are just stepping up because they understand the importance of loss. And so I saw so many people in helping or leadership positions. And if you get a great therapist, by the grace of God, they became grief literate. An amazing grief group leader, thank goodness they were good, or an amazing coach. Might have been true for the Mankind Project. It was for my son that, there were some leaders who were good with grief.
By the grace of God there too. Yeah.
I wanted to help people get this training. So I have a grief educator certificate program that we train therapists, we train coaches, and we train people who have gone through the dark night and want to turn their pain into purpose and help each other as a peer-to-peer supporter, or run grief groups, or they're in grief group leader positions, or they're just in leader positions. So I want to be able to train them. So folks can get information at griefeducator.com is where they can find that, griefeducator.com. And it's a 3-month program. And it's really, I think, an extraordinary program that really helps people be grief literate to help in this world a little more.
Thank you. And I will do a personal recommendation around the grief educator work that you've been doing. So 2 men who I know very well in the Mankind Project have both gone through that program. And what I witness with one of them, especially who I am in meetings with almost every week, is that there has been a transformation of how he shows up in business meetings after having gone through the process of really learning about his own grief. He is a man who has lost many, many family members, many people close and dear to him. And it's not just about grief, right? It has transformed the way that he shows up in the world.
Well, that's what's amazing is, there's something about, if you learn to grieve well, you learn to live well. And I mean, the guest speakers in the program, trauma experts and different psychiatrists and, it's just really amazing guest speakers in addition to me teaching every week. So not surprising, because I think, grief skills are life skills.
Very well said. So please, y'all listening, go check out www.grief.com and www.griefeducator.com to learn more about David Kessler and David Kessler's work. This has been an incredibly moving conversation, David. I'm grateful that you took the time to hang with me today.
I'm grateful to all that you do and the Mankind Project does. And, I think it's a challenging time in a world for men that, not only do we still get told to be strong, but it's like, be the rock and be vulnerable. Wait. The rock and vulnerable? I'm a little confused. So I'm grateful that it continues to, mankind is out there helping men navigate their way through all this. And anything I can do, I'm a big supporter of that.
Thank you, David. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Keep coming back to the Mankind Podcast for more conversations like this one.
This has been the Mankind Podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. And of course, I want to thank you, the listener, because through your attention and your support, you make it a heck of a lot easier for us to let men out there in the world know that they are not alone and that there is more than one way to be a man. And if you've been enjoying the music throughout this episode and all of our episodes, check out Jim, Donovan, and the Sun King Warriors. I have links to them in the show notes. Now, the fee for this episode is simple. If you found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, remember that life doesn't happen to us, it happens for us, so long as we rip the pen out of fate's hand and become the author of our own story. So my friend, pick up the pen and we'll see you next week. Lots of love.
Hey, it's Boysen. On the Mankind podcast, we've brought some incredible guests on to talk about the importance of doing the work to improve our mental and emotional health. And here's the truth. Multiple times over the last 25 years, I've had the help of one-on-one work with some amazing therapists. For me, for my wife, for both of us as adoptive parents, and for our kids. The Mankind Project and Men's Group, though awesome, are not a substitute for professional mental health support. And so I'm thrilled that the Mankind Podcast now has BetterHelp as a sponsor for the show. BetterHelp works online. It asks you what you're working on and then matches you for live one-on-one sessions with a licensed therapist, someone trained to work with you, listen, and offer helpful insights. I'm using BetterHelp. It's super easy, and I like what I'm getting. If getting one-on-one support in the comfort of your own space feels like a good direction for you, I invite you to check it out. Go to the link in the show notes or betterhelp.com/mankind. And if you sign up, you'll get 10% off your first month of therapy.